Welcome to the Business Transformation Show with international speaker and award-winning author Allison Phillips. Brought to you by GreatSmallBusinessAdvice.com. This is a show for business owners who are ready to get new clients, close more sales, and experience a business breakthrough from the inside out. Now here's your host, Allison Phillips.
Hey everybody, it's Allison Phillips here, and I am interviewing today Trevor Blake, who is the New York Times bestselling author of the book 3 Simple Steps. And I asked him to come on with me today in this video interview so I can ask him tons of questions, and I was just telling him that I had pages of questions to ask him about 3 simple steps so we can understand a little bit more about why he wrote the book, what's in the book, and different concepts of what he covered in the book as well. So welcome, Trevor. One of the concepts in your book is quiet time, which has been an amazing and powerful experience for me in doing it. But I wanted you to share a little bit about why this is important. Why is this a critically important part of 3 simple steps to experience the life and the business that you want?
Okay, it's the motivation for making the second step a really important step is that I come across a lot of people who say they want to change their life, but they just don't have any great ideas, and it's the one thing that holds you back. One of the things I noticed in all of those autobiographies, is that there was a point in time where somebody just had a great idea and it changed everything. Now, they had the mentality control and the tools and techniques that we talk about in 3 simple steps to turn that idea into their reality. But where did the idea come from was a fascination for me. And what I noticed was that they all had their own way, and they were very common and very similar, even though in their own time they gave them different labels. They had a way of creating those moments of insight. And when you're stuck in the quicksand, that's what you want. You want a good idea that can change this. So step 2 is all about how to put yourself in a position to create moments of insight. Now, we start from a scientific perspective because creating moments of insight is a scientific process, not a new age process. And so you have to understand there's 100 billion neurons, and they create, as I said, in 20 minutes, 600,000 trillion signals. But the way most people use their brains is very different, and all of those signals happen at the speed of light. That's a phenomenal piece of equipment that you have between your ears. But what most people do is not use that piece of equipment, because the world we live in, which we think is really sophisticated and technological, all of that technology has the effect of slowing the way the brain works down. And we've got some clinical trials to show that, and you can see it in the MRI images of what happens when your brain is exposed to different things. So think about it. The brain works at the speed of light. It is helping me right now observe a field of energy which vibrates in and out of existence millions of times a second. This is pure quantum theory. And it interprets that as an image that hits the back of my retina upside down, and then my brain turns it to the right way, and I can make sense of it. In order for my brain to do that, those neurons have to really slow down. That working process has to slow down incredibly to allow me as a human being to interpret something that's happening at an incredible speed, at a speed that I can cope with. It does the same with sound, and the same with taste and touch and all of our senses and intuition. Our brain has to slow down to help us have this experience of being a human in a world that is basically just made up of energy. And that's a scientific statement, not a new age statement. And on top of that, we wake up in the morning and our brains screech to a halt to make us get out of bed and coordinate putting our clothes on. And the next thing we do is we pick up our mobile phone and we start answering our texts. The brain has to screech to an even slower speed in order to help me coordinate my thumbs so that I can turn what is happening behind the scenes on that mobile phone into something that I can see, and then turn into something that makes sense, that I can understand and communicate, or understand and absorb. To do all of those everyday tasks, the brain screeches almost to a halt. And that's a good and bad thing. That means we can live in the world we are, but that means that you're not really the sort of person that's going to have moments of genius, because you're locked down into this world of living, into everyday tasks. And so what these great people that I noticed did was they had a way of stepping outside of the technology of their time and doing absolutely nothing for a period of time. And I thought that was fascinating. And so I thought I'd give it a go. And my life has been changed as you're experiencing now. It's just changed in so many ways because of that. But I didn't, when I first started doing it, doing what I'm going to describe in a minute, I didn't understand the science. But over the next 20 years, the technology caught up to the point where I can now understand the science. What we do, so what I recommend is 20 minutes of doing absolutely nothing. And I recommend it as early in the day as you can, just because it's a special time of day. There's not a lot of noise or distraction. And what you do is, by doing nothing, you allow your 100 billion neurons to go externally instead of internally. They can simply go out into the universe and communicate and connect. Now that does sound new age, but that's an amazing thing, because what we now know is that the whole of the universe is connected by a particle called the Higgs boson. The Higgs boson is the stock in the pan of ingredients that makes a soup. It exists everywhere, from the beginning of time, from the Big Bang right the way to the end of the universe that we understand, and it's what connects all of us to everything. And our neurons are connected through this amazing field of soup that has only just been it was only just recently proven that this particle existed, although Einstein believed it existed back in 1925, and most people did. They just hadn't had the technology to prove it. Now they've proven it. So that means that everything and everyone is connected. So if you do nothing but let your brain do what it wants to do at the speed of light for 20 minutes, it can only provide benefits. And the main benefit is it allows you to connect with everything that's out there, and therefore you get access to all of these incredible ideas and incredible knowledge, and you wonder, where the heck did that idea come from? And I'm not just talking about a good idea which is sort of, oh, I think I'll wear red instead of blue today. I'm talking about ideas that come to you almost like a blueprint, like someone puts a manual of information in your hand, and you don't have to think about how to open it and how to turn this manual into an experience. That's the quality of thoughts that come your way. That's what I saw with Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie and all of them. The quality of the thought that they had this moment of insight, and they didn't then go, okay, what do I do now? They went and did it because they knew exactly what steps to take next. In my own life, those moments of insight, the most dramatic ones have been my businesses, and so I've had this idea, but the idea is so complete that I'm almost running to start it. I'm almost I got to get it going. I got to do it because it's just so full. I cannot simply ignore it anymore. Whereas with just a quick idea, you can ignore it. So that's the quality of it. And what I get more emails about this than probably the other two steps. And people are just blown away by the quality of the insight that they've just had, and that's what makes the difference. That's what takes them from this sort of almost mundane life into this incredible experience of achieving their dreams. So it's really important to put yourself in a position to be able to have those moments of insight. Now, it's great hearing it from me, and you have to take my word for it that I hear it from hundreds of people. But every day I come across people who are far more successful than I have been at this point who do the same thing. And they all give it different titles. I call it taking quiet time, because I felt that if I've tried meditation. I'm hopeless at it. I think meditation requires a teacher, and it requires a discipline, and it aims for something different. It aims for something that I'm not trying to aim for. I'm aiming for a moment of insight. And so I call it taking quiet time, but it really is the core of transcendental meditation, and the key in that term is transcend. It's not about calming down, it's not about slowing down, it's not about quieting down, and I probably used the wrong phrase, taking quiet time. It's about letting your brain transcend. And yesterday, a reader of Three Simple Steps sent me an article, and I forget this guy's name. I'm going to put it in my podcast this weekend, actually. He's a hedge fund. He's one of the most successful hedge fund managers. And he was at a lecture in New York yesterday or the day before, and he said that all of his great ideas come during his 20 minutes of meditation in the morning. And he can't imagine facing his day without his meditation, and he can't imagine he would ever amounted to anything without doing his meditation. I thought that was great. But when he described his meditation, he basically described taking quiet time. He talked about loosening up and freeing both the left side and the right side of the brain to connect and communicate with whatever. I have no idea, he said, but that's where I get all my great ideas. Now, he's worth $5 billion. So my attitude has always been, well, if it works for him, who am I to say it's not going to work for me? And I'm not worth $5 billion yet, but I'm not complaining. And so if people are watching this, they say, okay, if it works for Trevor Blake, then why don't I give it a go and see? And that's all you have to do. You have to give it a go, because most people the very next day are blown away by the results.
So I had a question on that, because you're talking about moments of insight, which I've experienced myself. And prior to reading and implementing Three Simple Steps, I had never experienced ideas coming to me in that form and fashion. So I know the difference now that I'm implementing 3 simple steps between, oh, that's a really great idea, and oh my gosh, what the heck did that come from? Because the difference for me felt like, I've had many ideas in the past, and I would implement those ideas with passion, and I love it, and I'm moving forward with it. But the difference that I felt for me was I went from, oh, that's a really great idea I just had. Oh, let me go implement it. To it's like the idea comes out of nowhere, hits you over the head like a 2x4, and it's not just the idea, it's all of the steps to implement the idea starts flooding your brain, and it's like you got to grab a pen and a notepad and start writing as quickly as you can. And I've had ideas in the past where I get the idea, but it wasn't like a full, like you call it a blueprint, it comes with a blueprint. I've had ideas in the past where it's, I might get a couple of steps here or there, but I think the difference in my experience of moments of insight and ideas coming to me in the way that is manifested now through 3 simple steps is that the idea does come fully, it's fully operational. It's like all these steps come with it, and you have to almost stop everything and grab it as quickly as it's coming. And that's what the difference has been for me. But I'm sure there are people watching this interview right now that's going, oh, well, Allison's a successful business owner, so she must be brilliant in some way. Certainly, Trevor Blake, Mr. sold his business for $300 million. He must be born with some special gene or something. I mean, the guy at whatever teenage years went in and read biographies of famous people. That's not me. I've never had these callings to do these brilliant things. I've never had a brilliant idea. How would I know that the 3 simple steps would actually inspire this within me? What if it's that the people who it worked for had a special gene within them, some kind of internal brilliance that it enhanced, but I don't have that? How would you respond to somebody who might be having that thought?
Yeah, I mean, I have no scientific evidence to say, does Trevor Blake have a special gene or not? I mean, if I had a special gene, then surely my siblings would also have the same gene, and my parents. And as we described earlier, my parents, they were poor. We lived on welfare. My brother and sister have had regular jobs all their life, but the same job, same place, both divorced. My parents would have been divorced if my mother hadn't died. And I've been married, very happily married, for 30 years. And we'll be very happily married for the next 30 years, God willing. And so I don't think it's a gene. I do believe we are all born with a clean slate, but we become a product of our environment. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it is. So we start to, we have in the front, in our neurons, we have a part of our frontal lobe here, where there's a particular group of neurons. They're called mirror neurons. And one of the things that separate humans from most animal species, I should say. And what they do is, and we have MRI images showing how all this works now. What they do is they show that when we observe something in our environment, these mirror neurons actually capture it and allow us to mimic that behavior. So if we were to be suddenly exposed into the example the neuroscientists use is that you go to the Arctic. You can see that a polar bear is wearing a thick white coat and is warm, and you're freezing cold. And so you don't have to spend the next 200 million years evolving a thick white coat. You can kill the polar bear and get a thick white coat. And it's not a very nice example, but it's quite dramatic, and so that's why I remember it, because you can always remember anything that's dramatic, and it's a mental trick, Make it sexy and dramatic and you remember it. And it's very true. So we have these mirror neurons that allow us to observe our environment and then mimic it and create it, and that's good and bad. And so the bad part of that is that from a very early age, because our parents don't understand the 3 simple steps, from a very early age we start to mimic the behavior, the attitudes, the philosophies of the environment that we're around, which is usually very much our close family. And then the environment we're put into. I was put into a state school, and so I tend to mimic the attitude and behavior of the state school and start out thinking that I'm a socialist or something, So you end up in a situation that was not of your controlling. So that's good. That's a good thing to know. But the other important thing is it doesn't matter what situation you find yourself in. There is never a bad time to recreate yourself. and you're never too old, and you're never too poor, and you're never too ill to recreate the life that you have. And I have proven that in my own life, and I've seen it in obviously hundreds of lives. I think if we could rewind ourselves, if we could take this knowledge of the 3 simple steps and then all rewind ourselves back to the day that we were born, we'd all have very different experiences as a result of the knowledge we took back with us. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. And so there's a certain trust required here that if you apply that, if you use this recipe, it doesn't really matter where you are, you'll get away from where you are. And, in the same way, we could all be born in a line, and you would expect us all, therefore, 25 years later, to all be thinking and behaving the same way, but you'd find us all to be thinking and behaving in completely different ways because of what the people who were responsible for us helped our minds lock into, so that we began to think and feel certain things according to the people who are and the environment around us. And I just don't believe that success is ordained. I truly think it's something that we have total control over.
One of the things that you say, Trevor, is that you don't have to believe that the 3 simple steps is going to work in order to implement them. Like, it doesn't require you to believe. Can you share a little bit about why you say that?
Yeah, I mean, I've read quite a few self-help books that say, you'll see it when you believe it, and it just makes me want to slam my forehead, because the laws of nature, laws of physics don't need you to believe in them. Okay, I mean, you can sit under a tree and completely deny that an apple's going to fall on my head, and then the apple falls on your head. Okay, physics is physics. There's no getting away from that. And so you don't need to believe in the 3 simple steps. You just need to practice them. It doesn't matter. And eventually you'll see so much good stuff happen in your life that you become a convert. And I meet a lot of skeptics, and one of the biggest skeptics I met recently actually felt he was in such quicksand and was so desperate in his quicksand that he decided to give it a go. And he kept a log, and I think I might have mentioned this before, I don't know, but anyway, he leaves what I thought was a really good job, but he hated his job, and he starts his own company, and he just closed on $8 million round of financing with no equity loss. He's basically been given $8 million to turn his idea, his moment of insight, into reality. Now, I have no greater advocate of 3 simple steps than this guy, and yet only just a matter of months ago, I had no greater skeptic. So all you have to do is just give it a go, and eventually you'll go with it, because you're just seeing so much success. But the key thing is that you're working with the laws of physics, and it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter at all. Mm. And the other important thing is that when we talk about belief as an emotion, it's fairly weak. It's not just believing is not going to bring a lot of stuff to you. So I think there are 3 levels of achievement emotion. So there's desire. And if you desire something, the chances, it's very vague. There's no focus. There's no specificity about it. You just desire a better life. There's a chance that you'll have better thoughts, better reactions, and therefore might get a slightly better life. But it might not be in the way that you've designed or wanted. But you might be better off. So it's a fairly weak emotion. And then there's belief, and belief is a little more focused, and that's really something that matches goal setting, which is something else I don't think works either, which we can talk about. So you get to this level of belief, and belief can help you achieve slightly bit of different things in your life, because by believing you have more and more thoughts about what you're for rather than what you're against. And so by the laws of nature, that's going to improve your lot. But that neither desire nor belief is going to get you from where you are to the dream that you have. I don't like to share dreams, but I can share what. When I was a young kid, I wanted to be a playwright. I wanted to write movies. Okay, and I wanted to do that when I was 7. Okay, so as weird as that is, and then life gets in the way, and that dream all gets suppressed and everything. And then when the 3 simple steps get working, I get back to that dream and I go for that dream. Well, desire and belief is not going to get me from where I was to getting a screenplay turned into a movie. It's going to take something a little bit more than that. And so there's a 3rd level of emotion. And the 3rd level of emotion is a sense of knowing. And I talk about in step 3 how you get from where you are to this sense of knowing. And all of us know what a sense of knowing feels like, because we all get these moments where we just know something. We just know it's going to be true. We just know something's going to happen, but we don't understand the process or the physics or what's happening, the emotions around that. But it happens to everybody. But what you can do is create a situation where you can make that sense of knowing a reality on a more frequent basis. And so you can have this dream, and you blast through desire and belief to the sense of knowing, the that this is what you're going to create, which is what I was able to do with the screenplay, which is going to be the movie. So we're making a movie. We're going to start it in 2015, probably be distributed in 2016. So to go from having the desire to write a movie when you're 7 to actually achieving it requires you to get to this sense of knowing, and there's a process of that we talk about in the 3rd step, the 3 simple steps. This is how you get to this sense of knowing, and that's a very, very powerful emotion, and you have to be there to achieve your dreams because you're always competing against the emotion of fear. And I think fear is the strongest emotion. I think it's stronger than love, I have to say. I think you have to work at getting an emotion of love, whereas fear comes instantly. And it can really put you straight back down. Fear will stop everything. And so and belief is not strong. I don't think that belief is strong enough to counter fear. I don't think that love is strong enough to counter fear. I think you have to get to the sense of knowing where the mountain can move to Muhammad. That's where you have to be.
And you talked in the book. You talked in the book as well about how to achieve that sense of knowing. So I would encourage people to get the book as well to follow the steps that are in there. One of the other questions that I had is you talked about connecting with nature, and for people who may not be connected with nature, what's the purpose of that? Why do you include that in the book? And what does that have to do with achieving what you want in life, in business or in life?
Well, it's another thing that it's not an official part of the 3 steps, but it's important to the recipe. It's as important to the recipe as the ability to be able to mix ingredients. You can put ingredients in a bowl, and if they just sit there, you're not going to have a cake. You've got to mix them. So getting in touch with nature is kind of the mixing of this thing together. And I noticed it in all of those lives in the biographies and autobiographies, is that they all had this very strong connection for nature. They loved nothing more than going for walks in the woods, and they had great ideas when they went for that. And then I was fortunate to live in the countryside when I was reading these books, and I just I felt part of my environment. So I was always outdoors, and always amongst nature, if you like, and it had a profound effect on me as a person. And also I saw tremendous benefits in my awareness of my connection to everything. So the more I was in nature, the more connected I felt to other people, and the less threatened by other people, and the less I got bullied. And the more I was in nature, the more my life became rounded. So it's always very important to me from that standpoint. Then as I get into the 3 simple steps and I start to look at this from a scientific basis, after you've had this amazing moment of insight, and you've sat for 20 minutes in the morning and you've let your brain neurons do whatever they want to do. I think of it as letting them out to play. So I let them out to play for 20 minutes in the morning. Go and do whatever you want to do, but be back here in 20 minutes because I've got to make a cup of tea for my wife. And off they go. And after 20 minutes, all of that, what you've done is you've created, so you can show scientifically that by doing nothing for 20 minutes, you actually create millions of new neurons, millions of them. When we're gestating, we create neurons at the rate of 250,000 per second. Amazing thing that's going on in the womb. And science used to think that, okay, once you're born, over time those neurons degenerate and you never make new ones. Now we know, since 1986, now we know that actually you can regenerate neurons all the time. And if you expose your brain to certain things and do certain things, you can make new neurons, and they haven't been polluted by all that TV and all that environment. It's like being born again. It's like being a baby. And so for 20 minutes every morning, that's what I think of myself as doing, is rebirthing neurons. Now, what do you do with those neurons? Well, when I was born, those neurons were exposed to something. Now I want to expose them to something that's going to benefit the life I want to have. And so you can do several things. You could switch on the TV and you could expose them to news, and then you basically just kill them off one by one. Or what I recommend is that you get out in nature, and the benefit of that is that these neurons have to connect. They want to plug into something, some stimulus. They're brand new neurons, and they're craving for it. And so I plug them into nature for the very simple reason that all of nature is connected, including ourselves, including this desk and this computer. All of nature is connected through the basic particles that exist. So we know that there are fermions and bosons, and nothing else exists but that. And that the primary particles that give us the sense of solidity and of matter are held together by what we call field particles, so sort of energy holds all these things together, and the thing that holds all of that together, this Higgs boson, is what connects the whole universe. Well, I would rather be connected into that, thank you very much, than connected into some talk show host on a TV show, because I know it's just going to give me more benefit. I don't understand perhaps how I'm connecting, I don't know where all this thought is going, but I know the quality of the day I have after doing that is far better than the day I would have had if I'd connected to some, you know, nonsense media or something like that. So that's the benefit of doing it, and so that's why going out into nature is really important, because all of nature is connected, and all of nature just, you know, nature's not complaining, nature's not you know, worrying about how much weight they're carrying or worrying about how much debt they have. Nature is nature, and so it's a very easy way to connect. It's much more difficult for you and I to connect, because your head is full of your worries and your concerns and your ideas and your prejudices and your thoughts about me and your opinion of 3 simple steps. Okay, my head is full of my thoughts and my prejudices and my lists for the day and what am I going to have for lunch and all this kind of stuff. Okay, nature doesn't do any of that. So when you connect in nature, it's very pure communication, and it happens very fast. And when you get into some of these stories of self-made men and women, you know, they all come back to the same conclusion, that by being in nature, that's how they were able to achieve the lives, the amazing lives that they achieved. That's how they were able to make a more positive difference in other people's lives, because they got to the point where they felt they could achieve absolutely anything, working hand in hand or soul in soul with nature. And every single book I've read of a self-made person, including modern ones today. So Richard Branson, actually, I read an article from Richard Branson just the other day where he's talking about the importance of nature in his life, and he's always out in nature. He's out in the ocean, he's out in the plane in the sky in a hot air balloon. You know, he's got his own foundation. He's got this beautiful island in the Exuma chain, the Necker Island. I mean, you know, it's not a surprise that people who we would view as being incredibly successful are almost always highly connected to nature in some way. They're almost always outdoor people.
Interesting. I thought that was really interesting, and your book inspired me to go out in nature every morning for a long walk in the park and through the woods. And I tell you, in the beginning it was like, I'm just taking a walk, just, you know, taking a break, being quiet, adding to my quiet time during the day. And the more I did it, the more I felt this strange and weird connection with being out in nature. I found myself creating this growing appreciation for clouds and trees and flowers and grass and little squirrels running around. And I just found that it became a part of what fueled my day in a strange way. And I can't even explain it, but it is now part of what fuels my day. I feel refreshed. I feel, you said plugged in. That's what I feel. I feel like I'm plugging in with another, you know, creative force. And for me, you know, I believe in God, and I believe that God created all of that. So for me, it's like even a greater connection to that belief and that sustaining power of nature. I can't even put words to it, but I know that the more I do it, the more connected I feel inside, and the more, it's almost like a big refreshing surge, because I'm out there for about 30 or 40 minutes, sometimes an hour and a half, and when I'm done, it's like, whew, it's like I'm floating. It's like I feel so refreshed after having been out in nature. So I get how that could really fuel your success in life. It just feels all connected to me now. So I totally get what you're saying.
It does, because you're following the 3 simple steps. If you know, I come across a lot of. I had a great, my perfect example of. I mean, most people go out into nature, but they still remain disconnected. The important thing is to make the connection. And the best example I saw, I have a place down in Southern California, and we were on a beach, and these 3 humpback whales came right into the cove, as close to the shore as you could possibly get, and they'd corralled krill, I think, and were just feeding. It was the most amazing thing, and a group of people gathered, with people were walking their dogs on the beach in this corner, and it was mesmerizing, because they were so close to us, and they were breaching and coming back down again. One of those once in a lifetime things. And at the far end of the beach, a couple of people who were I knew very well who lived nearby where I was. They're walking down the beach and they were chatting the whole time and gossiping the whole time, and they were pretty negative people, or are negative people, I suppose. And I don't say that judgmentally. It's just that they're locked into that, always finding fault with people, and I could hear them coming, and they were really getting into something. I mean, they were really, oh, isn't she awful? I can't believe she did that. You know, that type of conversation. And they walked all the way down the beach and all the way back. I never noticed the whales, or that the group of people had gathered and were watching something amazing. It was quite startling. They were that disconnected from nature. That image is always stuck in my head. The key thing, and so you can find a lot of people who say, I'll go for a walk, and then walk around the woods, but the whole time they're walking around the woods, they're thinking about the problems that they have. They're thinking about their debt or the mortgage or how am I going to have this conversation with my boss tomorrow? You know, they're just locked into what's going wrong in their life. And in doing that, you are completely disconnected. It doesn't matter the fact. Just going out into nature is irrelevant. You may as well just sit at home. You may as well sit in front of the TV. If you're not creating these new neurons every day, and if you're not controlling your mentality, whereby you're now looking outside of yourself instead of inside, and you're looking for something you want instead of being against what you don't want, that's the way you connect. Because your neurons are working in a completely different direction, and they're looking for a new connection. Your neurons are looking to connect, or the neuron signals are looking to connect. So you have to really be in that mentality control and in that looking forward instead of looking backward all the time in order to make that connection.
Yeah, and it sounds like if you're in nature, but your brain is in the past, focused on something that happened in the past, or your brain is hyper-focused on something that you need to fix or address in the future, you're not really present to where you are. Therefore, you cannot really be connected. You just happen to be in nature, but you're not really connected to the experience of being out in nature.
Right, that's exactly it. And once you get into the habit of controlling mentality, and then you get the experience you just described, it's almost like you've never been in nature before. You knew it was there, but you really didn't know it was there. Yeah. And the analogy I use is it's a little bit like if you look through a window and you see a bath and you see someone fill a bath, then you watch someone have the bath. You just don't get it. It's like someone put water in a vessel and then they're sitting in it. Why? You have to get in the bath and you get that wonderful the stress release of a wonderful warm bath. You have to be in it to get it. And the only way you can understand nature, we could talk about it for hours, but the only way you'll ever understand it is to get in it. And then you get the same feeling. You get the same, I've not experienced this before. This is very different to the nature I thought I knew. And that's what you get when you start to control your mentality and be for what you want.
Yeah. The other question I had for you was a profound insight that you shared both on your blog. I don't know if you shared it in the book, but I know you shared it on your blog in one of your podcasts. It's that awareness of the clues that are happening all around you. And I wanted to ask you to share what you did share in your podcast in terms of how you pay attention to clues that are around you and how that created a moment of, not moment of insight, but connected the dots and created, I forget the specific example you shared in your podcast, but I'd love for you to share that here. But just reinforcing for us, what is it like to walk around with your eyes wide open versus wide shut, as you say, and that specific example of how that worked out for you?
Well, once you start on the 3 simple steps, all kinds of synchronicity starts to happen, and it blows your mind away at first. It scares you a little bit at first, actually. You get used to it over time, and you get to the point where you anticipate it and expect it. But when it first happens, you think, well, that probably was, a good example would be, I decided I want to start my own company, and I left my employment, and the money's running out. And I'm starting to get a little panicky, and the investors aren't exactly knocking down my door to put money into this thing that I'm thinking about. And then the phone, but I'm following the 3 simple steps, so I know to stay calm, and I know that everything's going to work out just fine. And then the phone goes. This is a true story, by the way. The phone goes, and I pick the phone up, and this guy, his name's Paul. So Paul I never met him before, never spoken to him in my life before. Picks the phone up and he says, "Oh, I hear you are no longer doing the job that you were doing before, and I'm looking for someone to do that job for me. And I'm in Florida and he's in Seattle. It's sunny in Florida and it's raining in June in Seattle. There's no way I'm going to Seattle." And so I said to him, "No, I'm starting my own company." So he said, "Oh, that's interesting." We had a little talk about the company, and he said, "Well, send me the business plan," which I didn't have. So I put the business plan together, because when you get these moments of insight, you no longer need to plan. So I didn't bother with the business plan. And then so I scratched them together, sent it to him, and then he called back a couple of days later saying, "This is really interesting. I'd like to talk about it. Maybe we could be investors in this. If you're in exchange, you come and work for us a couple of days a week." Okay. So I flew to Seattle, and again with the mentality, there's no way I'm living here, and then fell in love with it, and liked Paul, loved the business. They could be the investor. And the whole thing took off, and because I'm expecting that kind of synchronicity, like a phone going out in the middle of out of nowhere, I'm at that point no longer surprised by it. But sometime later, in a conversation, we became really good friends. But I'm still are. In a conversation, I said, "Well, how did you know who I was, and how did you pick the phone up?" And he could not remember where he got my contact information from. He seems to think that he was at a medical seminar about 6 months before, talking to somebody who said, "Oh, this is the guy you need, and you need to talk to him," and maybe kept the number, but he really didn't know. But for some reason, he just felt compelled to make that call that day, just on the off chance. That's the type of synchronicity that becomes commonplace when you run the 3 simple steps for a period of time. So I was talking about that in my podcast, because one of the things that's really important is that you have your eyes open for that synchronicity, and so that when something happens, you know to react. And the reason I came across it was a reader had emailed me saying, "I want to meet this particular person who can help me achieve X," whatever it was. And I wrote back saying, "Well, if that's what you want, that's what will happen, but you might have to wait 1,000 years for that connection to be made." What's important is what you want, not who you meet. So just trust that life will fill in the details. And I said, you need to have eyes wide open, because otherwise what's going to happen is you'll be in the line at your Starbucks waiting for your cafe latte or whatever it's going to be, and the guy in front of you is the perfect person to get you that dream, but you're going to completely ignore that person because you're waiting for the man that you've identified who's going to help you. And that led to me writing that podcast, and sure enough, the very same day I had an experience whereby I was in I was contacting a particular investor. I wanted a particular type of investor, I should say, in a project that I'm working on right now, and I wasn't coming up. I had been given a list of names, and nothing was firing up. And there were some that I knew vicariously, and so I targeted them, didn't go anywhere, and I kind of ignored the rest because I didn't know them. And then 3 things happened on that very same day. I went to the hospital with my wife, and I heard 2 people talking, and they used this word that made my eyes open a little bit. Then I was driving down the freeway, and I saw on the side of a bus a brand new shuttle company, and it used the same word. And then that happened 2 or 3 times. And then when I finally got home, and I just picked this list up casually while I was thinking about something else, and there is the same word, and it's the name of an investor. I now know that I need no more nudges in the rib that's who I should have called. And that's having your eyes wide open. Now, if your eyes weren't wide open, I would have ignored all of those things. But because I'm used to the 3 simple steps, my ears are more finely attuned. So when I hear somebody use a word or a phrase that it means something to me, I pay attention to it. When I hear or see that a second time, that's usually enough for me. In this case, it happened three different things. I heard something and saw 2 things. But then when I got home, saw the name. So I gave the guy a call, and it was a perfect match, absolute magical match for the 2 of us. Exactly what he was looking for. He's exactly what I was looking for, and we have a fun oncology cancer research development project now underway that's properly funded. And it's all because I've learned to have those eyes wide open. But it's something that you do have to learn over a period of time. And the way you learn is you do get hit over the head with synchronicity to the point where it no longer is a surprise, and after that you have your eyes wide open because you don't want to miss anything. Mm-hmm. But at the beginning, most people don't have their eyes wide open, and they tend to miss those little signals, and that's kind of what I was trying to talk about in the podcast.
Cool. Yeah, I love that, because I don't think I'd ever been so aware of what's happening around me and so present to what is happening around me. And I loved when you said, most people are walking around with their eyes wide shut, because that was me. I was walking around during the day, but with my mind focused on the next thing, what I'm going to get, what happened in the past, and never really fully present to what is happening around me. And like you said, you miss really important clues that happen, like right there. It's like, you overhear a conversation, you see a word or a phrase like you did, but if you're never aware of what's truly happening around you, you're never fully present to the moments that you're in right there, you miss a lot of those clues. And I think that's part of the reason people say, I don't get any bright ideas, I don't get any brilliant ideas, I don't get any, nothing ever comes to me. And it's because they're hardly ever walking around with their eyes wide open, such that you described.
I think there's a more at stake than that, and that is that when you follow 3 simple steps, you commit to have the life that you want. Okay, you commit to be all you can be. It's a very powerful moment, and you set in motion events that you could not possibly predict, because you've already said, this is where I'm going, or actually you're actually saying, this is where I was, because we do it in reverse. So, but it's this thing that you're about to have this experience, whether you have it tomorrow or 10 years from now. I don't know what it's going to be, because everyone's different. But you're going to have this amazing experience. After that point, life will throw at you all of these clues that we're talking about. And like you say, most people have eyes wide shut at first. And the reason I caution people to have eyes wide open is that life will not quit. So life will send you all of these little clues. And if you miss those, it'll send you slightly bigger clues. And if you miss those, it'll send you a really big clue. And the problem with the really big clue is it might put you in a situation you don't want to be until you get the message. So for instance, you could find yourself, so I saw a sign on the bus here, okay? and that was the final clue. And then I saw the name later in that day. Had I missed that name next day, I might have been run over by that bus before I get that clue, okay? Now, I'm obviously being a bit facetious, but it works that way. At some point, life is going to grab you and hold you down and point at you and say, are you listening? And that can be a very uncomfortable position to be in. And those sort of uncomfortable positions can be losing your job, losing your partnership, actually becoming ill and ending up in a situation. And even in those situations, people can still have their eyes wide shut. All of those things happen for a reason, and they happen because life is trying to fill in the details. It might be an experience you don't think you want to have at that time, but it's there for a reason. And so if you have your eyes wide open early on, you can avoid some of the more dramatic events that are sent your way in order for you to pay attention.
Right, it's those little nudges. It's like, okay, here's another nudge.
I don't mind the little nudges.
And then wham! Okay, let me see what else I have for you. Oh, this is a good one. So you talk a lot about intentions in the book. What's the difference between intentions and goals?
Well, in hindsight, I regret even mentioning the word goals in the book, because immediately you do that, people compare the two, and there's no comparison. There's the chalk and cheese, okay? So goal setting is very important in our lives, the way we live our everyday lives. We write shopping lists, we set forecasts and budgets, and in work we manage by objectives and performance and appraisal and all those kinds of things. It's the way we live, it's the way we expand and grow, but it's kind of in baby step ways. Nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, the self-help movement and the business inspiration movement have taken a very normal part of life and turned it into something quite mysterious and mystical, and they've made this thing like, oh, we set goals and you do them this way and they have to be achievable to be believable and all this completeness and nonsense. And they gave people the impression that the only way to succeed or move forward is to go by goal setting, right? And I've always said that goal setting is pretty much setting yourself to fail. And I've met very few people who have achieved the life of dreams by setting goals. They've improved their life a little bit in certain aspects, maybe. Intentions, I've made the statement that intentions are goals with all doubt removed. And the third step, it shows you how to get to that sense of knowing where you remove the doubt. I think that's not 100% accurate. Intentions are your dreams. Intentions are what you intend to be when you can be all you're going to be. So if you have a broken washing machine, a goal is to get a new washing machine. That's okay. That's a goal. If you have a broken washing machine, an intention is to win the Oscar for Best Actress. Okay? They're that far apart. They're that dramatic. And so it's all about intentions, because what's the point otherwise? What's the point just improving your life week to week. Why bother? Why bother being alive? Life is about great experiences. One of my modern day heroes is a guy from Scandinavia. You may have seen some videos of him. He made himself a set of wings, and he has 4 little jet engines, and he flies. And he flies at 190 miles an hour. And he gets 13 minutes of flight before he has to fire off the parachute and come down. Some great. You can search him on YouTube. Some great videos of him. He just went round Kilimanjaro.
Wow.
To celebrate some Japanese festival. But why I mention him is in his interview after going around Kilimanjaro, I was watching it a few days ago. He said, they said, why do you do it? And he said, because life is to have these experiences and these emotions. What's the point me walking into work every day when I can fly around Kilimanjaro? And I think, well, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make in 3 Simple Steps, but I've taken 275 pages to say the same thing. And so life is about, what do you really want inside? Who do you want to be, and what do you want to achieve? And when you do that, we use a process that I call intention. So you make that the intention, and you follow this process, which allows that intention to become your reality. And, it would be impossible in the time we have to explain all of that process. But people get incredibly excited by step 3, and the danger or the dilemma is they tend to skip step 1, step 2 in order to get this step 3. But you do have to follow the process, and and you can set this amazing intention. When you achieve it, you set another. When you achieve it, you set another. Like this guy who flew around Kilimanjaro. The next thing he's doing, he's flying alongside an old B-52 bomber, flying Fortress. Just fantastic stuff.
So it sounds like the difference is, the goals are like these little steps, like what am I going to achieve this month, what am I going to achieve even this year, but whatever. It's like, this week, this month, small steps to achieving something that you want. Sounds like intentions is more of, this is the quantum leap that I want to experience in my life. That's you can't even begin to think of how you could possibly attain it.
Right, and so goals become a tool to achieve the intention. So an example would be, we've talked about some of my businesses. So my first business was, I had a great career, very enjoyable career in the biotechnology industry, but there were things in there that I saw that I thought I could do better. And most businesses, Richard Branson talked about this in one of his lectures. Most entrepreneurs don't set out to be an entrepreneur. They become an entrepreneur because they see something they don't like and they want to change. Something that frustrates them. A great example would be, Blockbuster has just finally died. They just closed all their 300 stores. Now, they may have died anyway because everyone's moved on to digital streaming, but it might not have happened so quickly, except for the fact that the guy that started Netflix got really upset because Blockbuster charged him $40 for overdue fees. And he started Netflix specifically because he doesn't ever want anyone else to have that really annoying experience.
I never heard that story.
Yeah, so he's really, really frustrated, and he starts Netflix, and of course Netflix is huge now. I mean, it's basically put Blockbusters out of business, and so life is like, so you really don't start out to be a successful entrepreneur. You see something that you want to change. So for me, I was put off by the corporate wastefulness in the biotechnology industry, because all of those unnecessary costs, this amazing building in the most expensive part of town, and everyone's bonuses and the big fancy cars and all the parties that everybody has in those corporate environments, all of those costs get passed on to the end user in the end in the price of the drug when it finally gets approved, and that's not right. I shouldn't say it's not right. I think there's a better way. And so I wanted to start a company, a drug development company that didn't waste investors' money that way. And so I started the world's first 100% virtual drug development company, pharmaceutical development company. And I also would get frustrated by people who have rare diseases are often overlooked by the big pharmaceutical industries. And it's not that anyone's doing it deliberately or anyone's evil or it's a conspiracy. All of that stuff is just as much nonsense as anything else. It's just that companies get big and they become beholden to the will of the shareholder. They have to make decisions for the shareholder, no longer for the patient, unfortunately. And so I wanted to do something that could go back to those people with rare diseases, and so we could develop drugs for rare diseases in this unique virtual business model, and all of the investment money could be guaranteed going into the program rather than paying my salary or giving me a fancy car or anything like that. That, from where I was to achieving that, is an intention. Because I was a salesman, okay? I was not a CEO. I had never run a company. I wasn't even a senior executive, okay? I was kind of a junior manager, if you like. I had a title director of commercialization. Okay, I was in a company where everybody had a director that had a title that was either assistant director, director, vice president, or executive vice president. There was nothing great about being called a director. And so I wanted to go from this place with no experience to this place where I'm running America's, in fact, the world's first ever 100% virtual company. That's an intention. So I set out with the intention. I followed the third step, and the attention the details start to fill in, and this company starts to become a real thing. But in order to run the company successfully, then I return to my goals, which are many different types, to my tools, which are many different tools, one of which is goal setting. So of course I set forecasts, and of course I set budgets, and we have projects, and we had step-by-step Gantt charts to achieve particular. That's just a normal way of life. But in order to be able to be in a position to use these tools to have a successful company, I had to follow the way of the intention. I had to go for the intention first, and that's the big difference. So you don't need to know how an intention is going to come to reality. You just need to go for the intention, follow the process of the intentions, and then you use your everyday tasks and tools, your management skills, your people skills, your goal-setting skills. They're just a normal part of life. They're not how you achieve dreams.
Okay, and my final question is, you also talk in the book about wizardry versus the warrior mentality. Can you share with us what that means and why you brought that up in the book?
Because the way we tend to live in our society today is based very much on the way society was 200 years ago, and it's not really helpful. And that is that most people live by the way of the warrior. Most workplaces praise analysis and data. And we're all hearing today about big data and how fantastic big data is. Well, big data isn't fantastic because it's based on history. There's no room for genius. Where's the Einstein going to come out of big data? It's not. You're going to just improve on what happened before. You'll be able to make the same things quicker, slightly better. So you need something else. There's a piece missing out of big data. It's an intuitive piece. So the same happens in your everyday workplace and also at home. We praise analysis and thought processes, and intuition gets left behind. Intuition no longer seems to have the value that it once had in society. You go back 500 years, and people would make decisions based on intuition, and the analysis came later. We've switched completely the other way. So we've gone to this warrior mentality. And the way I think about the warrior mentality is a bit like an Indiana Jones adventure. I love those movies, and what makes me smile in those movies is you have this one guy. He's your hero, and you're behind him, but he's actually stealing something that doesn't belong to him. But you want him to steal this thing, and that's how society used to be. Is that you could invade a country and steal their minerals. You could invade a country and steal their people and put them to work in the cotton fields, and that was perfectly acceptable at one point in time. Well, it's not anymore, thank goodness. And so that warrior mentality of taking and conquering is very much like an Indiana Jones adventure, and that's how most people go through life. Is that you expect to have greater and greater challenges that you have to overcome, and you step over the bodies of the poor souls that never made it, and eventually you get to your treasure, and you take your treasure and you escape, and you look, wasn't I good? Wasn't I clever? Well, you know what? No successful self-made man and woman ever did it that way. They swam against the common thought process. Henry Ford wanted to build a car that ordinary people could afford, and everyone said he was crazy because they were going with the luxury fun item for rich people. And Andrew Carnegie wanted to make steel the construction material of choice because he'd seen how strong it was, and everyone said no, everything's already made of iron and that's not going to change. So you can't really succeed by the way of the warrior, but we're taught that that's the way to be, that we have to baby step goals and keep on doing better and keep on trying to achieve more, and that's fine because you do have to work, but it's not going to achieve dreams. On the alternative side is something that women are more familiar with than men, and because men have suppressed their intuition over time. If you go deep enough into anthropology, you'll find that at one time men were the healers and child carers of the tribes, and women were the ones who went out and hunted. And then over time, and most tribes gave either of those jobs to the person who was best capable of doing that job, regardless of their sex. Over time, all of that has got changed, and men gained, when men took control of the printing presses and therefore communication and education, then men favored the warrior mentality over the intuitive mentality, and they started to fear it in the women around them. And that's where you go back into history and you see all these witch trials and all that kind of crazy nonsense that went on. And so women learned to suppress their intuition because they saw that it threatened men. And so now we live in a society where we praise the warrior mentality and we almost completely ignore the power of intuition. if you ignore the power of intuition, then we wouldn't even be talking, because Einstein would never have cracked the theory of relativity. If you ignore the power of intuition, we wouldn't be talking, because electricity would never have been invented, because it came out of nowhere. And as it's, so you have to have the balance between the two. So what I talk about is the wizard understands the difference between being too warrior-like and being too law of attraction-like, and gets the balance absolutely right, so that you have the warrior skills to hunt and nest effectively in our society, but you also have finely tuned intuition to sense danger and notice opportunity. And that's what you need in life in order to be successful. Because if you're in business, every day is different. Every day you're having competitive threats, and most people aren't even aware that they exist because they're not using their intuition. They're waiting for the data to arrive, which always has a lag behind it. If you didn't use intuition in business, there would be no iPads or iPods or iPhones. They didn't come from data or from analysis or for someone trying to conquer something. They came from some guy saying, "Do you know, that feels like it's a really good idea." And that's what we try to get. So it's about getting that balance right. And I call that balance being the wizard. And the difference is, one of the analogies I use, that if you're hungry and you fancy a loaf of bread, then the warrior will say, "I know where there's a loaf of bread. It's in that castle." So he'll go over the hills, he'll walk for 20 miles, he'll find the castle, he'll break down the castle wall, he'll kill the dragon, he'll break into the bakery, he'll murder the baker, and he'll take his loaf of bread. The wizard will say, "You know what, I'm hungry. I think I'll make myself a loaf of bread." And that's the difference. You create your life by being a wizard, and you do it by using the right. You can't bake a loaf of bread by putting the ingredients and staring at them and hoping it'll be a loaf of bread. But you put the ingredients in and you mix them up, you put them in the oven, you use the recipe, you have a loaf of bread. You sit down and eat it, and you'll have had your fill, and you'll have eaten every crumb before the warrior returns with his stale piece of bread. That's how it works.
Well, I thought that was my last question, but now your answer made me think of another question. So my final question, I think, is, you mentioned that over time, men have suppressed their intuition. It's not that it doesn't exist within them, they just kind of suppressed it. So if there's a man listening now thinking, yeah, I don't know what this intuition thing is, I don't know if I've ever felt it, how do I revive that inside of myself, given that I might have actually suppressed it all my life?
Right, and step 3 gives tools and techniques in order for us to fire up our intuition. But I do in podcasts and on my blog give warnings to men that we have a lot of work to do. Okay, women have. I mean, the good news about 3 simple steps for women, because we live in a male-dominated society still today, and even in the work, even in political levels, we're starting to see a shift where more women are getting involved, but it still needs a lot of work. It's still 25%, something like that. And I've worked in environments which were all male, and it was a toxic environment, golf and strip clubs, and really unpleasant. And we ignored everything that was outside of the company and focused on all the dealing with the crisis inside the company, and didn't do very well. And I've worked in an all-female environment where there were so many feuds going on, it was almost impossible to get anything done. I do think, and I've used those examples to mentally think that 50-50 is a pretty good place to be. So whenever I've been responsible for building sales and marketing teams in my life, even though you're not supposed to talk about this because human resources would have a duck egg about it, I have built teams that are 50-50 male and female, and they've worked beautifully, and they've been such rewarding environments to work in, because you've got the right mixture of intuition and analysis going on, and everyone feeds off each other. So I'm all into that. But for men, we have to work very hard to find our intuition again and fire it up. And so 3 simple steps. The 3rd step is a little harder for men than it is for women. But I think that's great, because women are starting off from a worse position because they're in a male-dominated world. So a male-dominated world. So
we deserve the advantage.
But finally, you've got this great advantage. So I think that makes you smile, and I get a lot of emails saying, it kind of released me here, that I realized I've got this power that I didn't realize that I had. And how do I use it? And that's what the 3rd step is about. For men, you've got to be really disciplined, and you've got to follow that step, every single day of your life, and until you start to. I mean, even today, I would say I think I have a really fine-tuned intuition for a man, but I would say it's probably 10% of my wife's intuition, which comes to her naturally. And I joke with her. I say, if I could bottle her intuition and sell it over the internet, I'd be the richest man in the world. Because it's that powerful, it's that useful. And fortunately, I'm aware of it, so I never ignore my wife's intuition anymore. And I try to use my own intuition and trust myself, which is where you want to be if you want to be successful.
Yeah. And I know that the book 3 Simple Steps can be found on Amazon and, you know, all these different places online. You could just Google it and find it everywhere. But I wanted to ask you, what's on your website? Because I actually stumbled upon your website after reading the book for 2 weeks. I didn't even know your website existed. So if you can share with our viewers what they can find on your website. And the website, again, is what? Is it 3simplesteps.com? I forget what it is.
You can just type in 3simplesteps.com and it'll take you to the website, which has a blog. Has some videos and some of the radio interviews that we've been doing over the last year, which has been a lot of fun. And you know, it's not something I planned in my life. I certainly don't need to do it, but it's been tremendous fun doing it. So I'll keep doing it as long as people say it's useful. But I also wanted to put some articles. Every now and again, I have a little thought. I think that's not in 3 Simple Steps, but I think it's important. So I put on. I don't have. You know, a lot of people do blogs because they want to stay up on the Google rankings and stuff like. I don't even understand all that stuff. Okay, so and I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong. But if I have something I want to share, I'll put an article out there or a podcast. And the podcast has become a weekly Monday morning podcast. I call it Monday Morning Medicine, and it's just, you know. Pretty much I get emails from all over the world, and every now and again I get 2 or 3 people asking the same question. And when that happens, I'll make a podcast to answer the question because I know more people will have the same question. And the whole idea is that as a community of people who are now wizards, a wizard community, that there's a Paulo Coelho book called The Winner Stands Alone. And one of the challenges of being all you can be is that it's not a very crowded place. The path to being all you can be a pretty lonely one, especially for a period of time. You start to bring into your environment other like-minded people eventually because the brain seeks out the same stimulus. And so you end up with a slightly different environment than you started out with. But between those places, it could be pretty lonely. At least that was my experience. And so the purpose of having the website and the blog is that if you feel a bit lonely, if you feel a bit, you know, you're wondering what the hell's going on with all these changes going around and why don't people like me anymore, you know, you can come to this blog and you can understand this is the process, and there are lots of little articles and sharing other people's successes and other people's ideas in the blog and in the podcast, and it's all for free. I mean, I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do. So all my profits from the sale of 3 Simple Steps go to cancer research and development.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all these answers with me today. I'll probably chop this up into lots of different videos, actually, in addition to sharing it with others who are sharing their stories about 3 Simple Steps. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing your time with us. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all of the amazing insights that you shared with us today, and I'm definitely going to be sharing it with the world for sure.
Thank you, Alison. I appreciate it. Thanks for the support.